Welcome back to the Scared Stiff Podcast. This is your host, Mike, and here's my co-host, Scott. How you doing today, my friend? Okay. Okay.
No, I was fucking looking at my vein popping out of my forehead, and I wish I could just pluck it out. I hate it.
I think that would cause some internal bleeding.
Yeah, but in the long run, I'd look cuter. Today's film is Nosferatu. This is the film that I wanted Mike to watch because he hasn't seen it yet. And it's kind of tougher for some people to sit down and say, I'm going to watch a silent film. Especially one as loud as this one.
Yeah, the music's really loud.
Yeah. I haven't seen it a million times. I just love Nosferatu because people talk about adaptating things, and Nosferatu is one of the first adaptations in the medium of film. And the things that they make different from it are really cool and make it stick out. And it sticks out so much that the idea of Nosferatu is built past Dracula now. Who else can say they've done that? There's a sequel. Well, okay, I'm sorry. There's a remake to Nosferatu in 1979. And then there's a film, Shadow of the Vampire, which is about the making of Nosferatu. The idea of this film is so interesting and unique that it's spawned more so off of it, even though it's just a fucking Dracula ripoff. That's pretty different, especially in a franchise built in horror.
This is a fascinating movie in the way that it came about because, obviously they wanted to make an actual Dracula film, and they couldn't get the estate to sign off on it, so they basically did their own
the
movie.
widow wouldn't do it. The widow.
So they just went off and did their own film. Just basically taking home the homework and changing a few things and then bringing it back to the teacher.
There's something cool about that though, because they did that. This is why the idea of sunlight killing vampires exists. Because in the original ending, he doesn't get killed by sunlight. And they changed it to do that, which is the big departure from the book, is that, we have to at least change the ending if we don't want to get fucking sued. So that's the only reason in lore that Dracula or vampires can be killed by sunlight is a lawsuit. And it's cool to think about how the first depiction of Dracula
isn't technically Dracula.
Not for sure true, because there's other historical things that say another one came out before, but it hasn't been proven, or we haven't seen anything since in years to prove that something has come before. But Nosferatu depicted sunlight to be lethal for vampires, and that's pretty crazy that it spawned just the fact that hey, she's gonna fucking whammy us with this big old suit, and I don't want to get that. I'm not Mr. Lawsuit over here. I don't want to get fucked over.
Yeah. Did you actually watch the making of documentary that came with the Blu-ray?
I didn't have time. It was so fucking dark by the time I watched the movie.
Yeah, I didn't watch it either. I watched the first 10 minutes of it. It's fascinating stuff. I just didn't have the time to watch it all.
So we watched the Kino version, which if you're gonna watch a release, I definitely say get it. I mean, most of the time you're gonna be watching this film, you're barely gonna be able to pick up on any facial features, but the Kino version, you'd be surprised it was made in 1922. I was genuinely stunned when I put that on. I was like, there's no fucking way they made it look this good. I'm shocked.
The only way it's totally noticeable that it's from the 20s is because of the way that the film is kind of, I don't know if I would say edited, but it's very jumpy at times.
Yeah.
And that's just a hallmark of the time, and also the color grading, very, very obvious.
That's another
because they use color to showcase time of day.
That's from the Kino release though.
Yeah.
That isn't initially in the film, where the color changes the time of day. If you're gonna watch most of the bootleg or just public domain Nosferatus, they don't have blue for night or yellow for day. They put that in the Kino one to make it easier to see what's happening in the film. And that was the big departure for me, because when I've seen the film, I've seen it entirely in black and white. So having color in it was jarring for me. It does make things flow better, and it makes colors pop out a little bit more visibly, but that is the big difference in the Kino versus most versions.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful. I can't imagine watching this fully in black and white and then having to figure out what time of day it is for some of these shots, because obviously there's no night photography. Night photography is a surprisingly new thing, at least consistently, because a lot of movies use day for night. and just color graded to change it. But I feel like it'd be really tough because everything's gonna look like daylight, and they're really trying to showcase that, oh, this is nighttime. There's things that do tip you off, like some of the cards tell you, oh, it's past midnight.
That's kind of what I would say in
But
general, is that like you have to pick on the story and pay attention to notice what's happening and what time of day it is. Is that just the way they talk about it? Or if you know the story of Dracula, you would know this happens during this time of day or whatever.
yeah,
Like if you see Nosferatu outside, it's like, well, it's fucking sure as hell not daylight out, I hope.
yeah. I think one of my favorite things about silent film, which I think is something that we touched upon in the previous outtake, is that because it's a silent film and they can't use dialogue for exposition, it is basically visual storytelling distilled down to its basic formula, aside from a couple of, like they'll put like a couple dialogue cards in, but most of it, the story, the action, all takes place without any voices, and it's just scored. And I love that about it. It's something that in my perspective is a very challenging thing to do as a storyteller, is to tell your story completely visually rather than with dialogue, especially nowadays when a lot of movies rely on dialogue as a crutch from something that's more interesting and more it holds the audience's hand a lot less, which is visual storytelling. And this is one of the most beautiful movies I think I've ever seen in my life. Just the quality of cinematography, the lighting, everything. It's so cool.
I think it's unique to say too, because it came out in 1922 when everyone talks about the German Expressionist era, and you'd think that there's a lot of expressionism in this film, but it purely only happens during nighttime sequences or sequences featuring Nosferatu. Everything else is just depicted completely normal. And I'd say also a lot of the architecture, like they use a lot of arches in the film, especially to display like the height of Nosferatu or Count Orlok. And that is kind of the biggest thing to show like the depiction of just power and how imposing he really is. Like some of the shots, like obviously the famous one where he's coming up the stairs with the claw, you know it's coming, but they like to really understand how a film in 1922 grafts this together. It's astounding.
That such movies from 1922 and that shot still rips. It's such a amazing, powerful shot of just pure elegance. It's such a great looking shot. There's a reason why it's something that is ingrained in pop culture. Even if someone hasn't seen Nosferatu, they know that silhouette. They'll always know that silhouette because it's done, over and over again. An homage to Death, hell, fucking Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom homages it. It's super ingrained in pop culture, despite the fact that a lot of people you could probably talk to today probably haven't seen this movie. Silent film has a barrier for entry for a lot of people because, again, they're used to stories being told a specific way. This isn't told like a normal film, and I think that that's to its strength because it does rely on those visuals much more often.
I'd also say that it's not like most films for the fact that it does take probably multiple watches to really understand or really grasp just how impressive it really is. Because the first time you're trying to pick up on things, but you're more just so like taken back by the way the storytelling is done. You're like, okay, I'm trying to follow this. This is different. Okay, cool. All right, well, I have to pick up on all the visual cues going on here because there's no dialogue given to me. All right, so the first time you watch the film, it's almost like, all right, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. But the second time is when you can really analyze it. You would say that for most films. Most films you'd say the first time you have a good time with it, or the second time you analyze it. But with silent film, the first time isn't just like having a good time, it's understanding it. It's getting used to it. That's very different for films nowadays where it's like, if I watch fucking Dracula or even like Frankenstein, I don't have to get used to it as much as like, okay, stylistically things are different. This is the time period it's in. Cool. It's pretty easy to put yourself in a mindset of like, I know how films are done in this time period. I can adjust fairly quickly, based on this film, this film. Cool. All right, let's go. And then you try to think about what's going on. But with silent film, there's no fucking easy way to get into it. This isn't like, all right, this happens for 5 minutes and I'm used to it. It's like, this is the entire film. There's a lot to get used to, and there's a lot to kind of like sit down and like really comprehend what's happening and how film is done differently. And like you said, it is all visual. And not only is it all visual, but the music, like the score in the background, plays a lot more weight to the visual because it has to tell the visual. If it doesn't coincide together, your film is destroyed. And that's why another problem with these films being public domain is that a lot of the times they change the score. Or they edit things out, and then things don't flow perfectly. That's why if you're going to watch a film like Nosferatu, Phantom of the Opera, or Caligari, I'd have to say you should probably get the Kino release. Or like Man Who Laughs, I believe is Warner Brothers, and they have an archives for that. You want to get the best quality you can get on that, because not only can you see things and it looks visually stunning for an old film, but you're going to get the best way to comprehend what you're trying to digest.
I mean, Kino, this is my first Kino Blu-ray, and I'll tell you what, I'm definitely going to buy some more.
Yeah.
They're very high quality, and they come with some really good special features. The visuals on this, I was just surprised by. I was really impressed by it. They have a release of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which was the first silent horror film I've seen. Probably going to buy that because that movie is fantastic, and if this is anything to judge by it, Kino's got some amazing releases. So yeah, I want to jump into the cast of the movie, but I mean we're gonna land specifically on Max Schreck, because he's not the star of the movie, but he is the reason that we came to watch it, I'd say.
If you accumulate the runtime, I think he has 9 minutes on screen.
Yeah, he does. Like I said, he's not the star of the movie, but he leaves an indelible impression from the first moment you see him on screen. I'll tell you what, I was watching this, and I remember sending you a text. I don't know what time it was at, but I know exactly the moment that it was at in the movie. And I texted you, "Damn, bro, Nosferatu's spooky." And it was the scene where I don't know why I'm blanking on his name, Jonathan Harker.
Hutter. They call him Hutter in the film.
Yeah, Hutter pokes his head out of his door, and fucking Nosferatu's standing at the very far end of the hallway.
Yeah.
And it's just looking at him and lingering, and I'm like, that is fucking creepy, my guy. And he's just, he just fucking floats up to the fucking door, saunters his ass in. I'm like, this is just spooky. That's really fucking creepy. It had me actually like uncomfortable watching it, and I was very impressed by that. But Shrek himself, like, he's just so wonderfully expressive and otherworldly in his performance. It's very convincing for the time, especially, and also with the makeup. The makeup's really impressive for the time as well.
They use it on a lot of people too. Like, they really make them look as deranged as they possibly can. Yeah. Like the Renfield stand-in looks like an absolute batshit fucking 15 out of 10 version of Danny DeVito. Like, he's just off the walls with his hair on his eyebrows being shot out. Like, he's crazy.
I'm 99% sure that the character who's like the doctor or the scientist in this, yeah, he's in Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
As Dr. Caligari?
Yeah. I think it's him.
I didn't look into it.
He looked super.
I looked into stuff about Nosferatu, but not the cast personally.
Yeah, you blew me away with that fucking
Conrad Veidt.
Yeah, dude, that fucking floored me. If you want to tell people what that story, who may not know it.
Yeah, because in Dr. Caligari, I know it's a little different film, but the guy who plays Caesar, who's the killer in the film, he's also the same person who plays the main guy who has a disfigured face in The Man Who Laughs, who's the Joker's appearance is based on, obviously from DC Comics. But another character he plays, which is a lot more prominent, is he plays the main Nazi in Casablanca. So to see that jump from being a very prolific silent era star to one of the world's worst type of people in one of the most popular and loved films, especially between you and me, it's crazy to think.
Yeah.
The only thing I know about this film, besides, because Max Schreck didn't live very long after the movie came out. I think he died around 59, and he was already like in his 30s or something in this film. So this is one of Germany's most beloved films. Most people in Germany will say, like, if I had to name one of my favorite films, it'd be Nosferatu. It's still beloved to this very day. But
yeah,
I wouldn't say he got the wide amount of recognition he deserved as much as other people did. The guy who plays Hutter is not the third. He was the third option to choose from as far as that actor. That wasn't the person the director wanted, or even the second person. But he was really prolific with the role. But this happened in 22. Obviously, the Nazis started invading in the 30s, and a lot of these actors had to either disappear or run away. Something interesting about this actor is that he fled to the Soviet Union. And he was very in line even when he was in Germany to the Communist Party. A lot of the stuff he did, even in Soviet Russia, was very heavily aligned, and Stalin pushed him and interrogated him to give out other names and was responsible for deaths of other friends of his. So it's weird to think how a lot of people during this film has just deteriorated in time. Or like the history between a lot of these actors is still very estranged and very ridiculous. Like Max Schreck was always a reclusive. He was in that time period still very much a character actor, and he kept to himself for the most part. There's not a lot of history about him nowadays. Even in stuff like Shadow of the Vampire talks about a bunch of these people, but in that film it's very skewed. Obviously Max Schreck isn't a real fucking vampire, but they even talk about the person who plays the archetype of Mina. It's not Mina. I think it's Ellen in the movie.
Ellen.
She's in that film. They portray her as like this big, bombastic, popular actress in Germany. She's not like that. She was a fucking relative unknown when this film came out. So a lot of things, even the depictions that are supposed to be telling a more like star-focused narrative, are still very different and changed.
Yeah, she was really good. I really liked her. I think she was my second favorite person in the movie, actually.
I like a lot of the design, and I like the character of Hutter a lot. I think as far as Jonathan Harker's goes, even though he's not Jonathan Harker, I do think he does a fantastic job.
Yeah, he's really good.
Most Jonathans either fall flat because their characters doesn't have a lot of narrative to them, but I just find him very fun on screen.
Yeah, he's entertaining as hell. He's got a lot of energy.
He does. Yeah. I love the makeup and the way they kind of like drive his hair to be a little bit more like flamboyant, but also suited up enough to feel like he's still like a real estate agent.
I also love how like a really what's his name? Knock. I really like Knock a lot.
Yeah, Renfield.
Because he's so fucking off the wall. His rendition of Renfield is really
fantastic.
It's funny to watch. It's just funny to watch him and Hutter in the office where he's giving him the job. And he's like, "Yeah, that nice house across the street from yours."
I find it wild that you
go
have
sign him up.
So many versions of Renfield, and like they still haven't topped like the 1922 and 1931 version. Like those two versions are still like so fucking good.
Yes.
And one of them can't speak.
Yeah, I love Knock. It's just because right before the transition out of that scene where he's giving him the job to go to Count Orlok's castle, and they're just fucking sitting there laughing really hard together. I'm just sitting there like, wow.
Things from the fucking people that have him imprisoned. He like fucking bites them. He's just so deranged.
Tries to break someone's neck.
Yeah, climbing
up the fucking wall to the railings.
I mean, you put it pretty perfectly when you're talking about like how like Hutter had a lot of energy. Like every actor or actress in this film just feels like they're displaying so much energy. That's one thing that's lost with the silent era. It's just because people have dialogue, they feel like they have to emote less. It's like, yes, maybe someone could be considered overacting or whatever, but like these people are throwing themselves into the role literally, and it's so expressive. That's what's so cool about these films.
Yeah, I love this kind of shit. It reminds me a lot of like the energy of like a not literally the energy of, but it reminds me a lot of some of the like the sequences in like a Charlie Chaplin movie.
Yeah,
just super duper high intensity action, or not action, high intensity, just energy. These people just like bouncing around the screen like crazy, and that's what they have to do in order to express themselves as actors in these kinds of movies because there's no dialogue. So it's always impressive, and it makes me respect the actors and actresses a lot more, because they have a tougher time expressing themselves than an actor nowadays would, because they don't have a voice. So I've always been more impressed with stuff like that.
It's something that isn't lost completely in the beginning of the sound era too, because you wouldn't have films like the first Frankenstein, where you have Dr. Frankenstein really emoting when he's talking about like giving life to creature, or
Yeah.
like just in general, like the Invisible Man, when he's talking about things and being very boisterous, like you see so much expression in the way he acts. Like a lot of the early sound films, they're built on just the power and the fluidity of these characters just walking around on screen. Or in a case like Dracula, how he doesn't move, how everything feels mesmerizing. Even in Nosferatu, I will say obviously the jump cuts of him moving around do not work as well nowadays, but when he stands there and he's staring, this Dracula, this Count Orlok, he feels mesmerizing. This entire atmosphere of the movie you could just summarize with the word mesmerizing.
Yeah, it's hard to look away.
Absolutely.
I'll say, like,
there's not a time on screen where you're not trying to feel like you're getting every second of what he's giving to you.
Yeah, I mean, I had to pause it a couple times just because it's just like it's one of those movies where it's just like at times it's uncomfortable, for one thing. Particularly with scenes like with Count Orlok, where like obviously Hutter cuts his finger and Orlok's like, "Oh no, you like your precious blood," and then fucking sucks his finger. Yeah. Also, I didn't know until I didn't realize until I watched the movie and Hutter showed the pinpricks on his neck that his fucking buck teeth are the fangs.
For Orlok?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Because I'm so used to like how much that like vampire media accentuates the canine teeth in our mouth, rather than that. It's just funny. It's like a rabbit bit somebody. I love how like when Hutter first meets Orlok, Orlok's like hiding his fucking ears. He's got his fucking hat on the whole time.
Yeah, because he's driving the carriage.
Yeah.
You know what I love about that is they never address the fact that he was driving the carriage.
Yeah. Nope. Never talk about it.
Like I find that so funny because it's like, oh yeah, like, aren't you the cab driver?
What? No.
Yeah.
Now?
Yeah. They don't say shit about it.
Yeah. I'm fine with that. Just make it weird. One of the things I did want to talk about, because I messaged you about it last night and you didn't respond to me, which is fine.
All right, dude. He's reflecting in the middle of a fucking video. Okay.
That's not what I'm doing. There's a reason you didn't respond. But I texted you. I said I didn't know that this was going to have such a downer ending, and this is going to wrap into kind of like the lore of this film, because it's different from most vampire things, at least I think of. Not just that, Orlok is a very, very unconventional vampire, or it was an unconventional vampire before I saw it, because there's other things that have copied it, like Salem's Lot and stuff like that. But the whole thing, like the way that they resolve the film and defeat Orlok, is basically Ellen has to sacrifice herself to kill Orlok, which is not in any vampire medium I've ever seen.
Yes.
I've never seen that where like a beautiful woman needs to just give them his blood so that he's distracted for the sun to rise.
I think that's very creative of it. They don't ever specify the fact that she is distracting him, but you don't have to. They say in the book that a maiden needs to give her life to take care of the vampire, but just the fact that after she does it, the sun finishes the job. I think it's very masterfully done.
Well, it's like the way that I think it said in the book was basically like, hey, a maiden has to give over her blood so that he misses the first call of the cock. Mm-hmm. So basically, I at least interpreted that as she has to distract him, the sun rises and kills him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never seen that in anything else before. That's just, it's cool to see an older movie that you think would, like, a lot of vampire films would steal things from, have things that still surprise you, because I had no idea that was going to happen.
Yeah. I
thought at the end of the movie that, I don't know, Hutter was going to show up with the Van Helsing type character and just fucking beat the vampire. They don't even talk about really staking.
No, they don't.
They do retain the whole him in the coffin with earth from his...
Which is weird they don't continue that in a lot of films.
Yeah.
Like, that was very heavily prevalent in a lot of origins, especially like 50s and before. Like, hey, they need the ground that they were buried in. But now it's just like, this motherfucker goes wherever he feels like now, as long as he's got a weird fucking coffin. Sometimes it's like, as long as he's just in the dark, man.
I'm also used to like vampires having servants with them, bringing their shit for them. They're familiars in terms of like Blade or What We Do in the Shadows and all that stuff. But he's just fucking full on walking down the streets and just shouldering his coffin like a goddamn Chad, man.
Yeah, he picks it up himself. I find that so funny.
He just has
lines all 5 of them up.
He's just walking with him, just like, yeah, dude, I'm fucking carrying my goddamn coffin on my shoulder. I'm an absolute Chad. Yeah, that's pretty funny.
I also like when Hutter gets there, because this is the problem when you're not being told about night and day or whatever. When Hutter first gets there, it looks like it's daytime. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how much time it stretches. He's like, hey, it's midnight. All the serpents are asleep. And you're like, hold on. I've got several questions. What fucking servants? You drove that fucking carriage. Second of all, it's midnight? Third of all, are we gonna not address the fact that that so-called werewolf over there was a hyena? Like,
yeah, that was the first thing when they said, like, yeah, the werewolf is out tonight, and it cuts to a hyena. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay. Why? Where'd you get the hyena? Why is it running around the hills of fucking Transylvania?
Yeah, he's just chilling too. He's not having too bad of a time. He's like, hey, this is some grass, right?
That's so weird. I guess they were like, well, if it's a werewolf, it can't just look like a dog or a werewolf or a coyote or like a wolf or a coyote. We gotta make it look like something even scarier, and then you just got this fucking cute hyena to show up.
Yeah, the very not
threatening
not threatening at all, very just passe, like, I'm having a good day, I guess.
And it's just like, is that hyena supposed to be Orlok? I'm not positive.
In the book, the werewolf
in certain media
is
it would be. Yeah, in the certain media, vampires can shapeshift into wolves. So I was like, is that supposed to be Orlok?
At least that's what doesn't rape a girl.
I'd have to assume that it's Orlok.
Yeah.
I don't know who else it would be. Unless there's, they're world building. They're trying to create the Nosferatu cinematic universe, and they're setting up the Wolfman in the first movie. But yeah, no, I there were a couple times in the movie where I got a little bit confused as to what time of day it was, because they used yellow for daytime a lot, and then they used sepia almost for like daytime indoors.
Yeah.
But then they would use sepia, or they use they'd use yellow for daytime indoors rather than sepia. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on anymore. I think, Kino, you're forgetting your colors.
I would say it'd be better if Kino didn't have a coloring system. Like, we can assume when it's daytime, there's no fucking vampire. Like, most versions it is just black and white. Because sometimes it is just black and white in the film, too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't...
If anything,
it doesn't matter that much. Like, if the vampire's on screen, it's clearly night. Whatever. Like, I don't need to be as confused as you throwing 3 different color palettes at me.
Yeah, if anything, remove yellow and sepia and just make it blue at nighttime.
Yeah.
So there's two colors. That's all you need is 2 colors. That's if the sepia isn't also have to do with the film stock. Maybe the film stock is degraded.
I'm sure that has to lend itself to why they changed it sometimes. Because they even say when they're talking about it in the beginning for the Kino release, it's like, hey, we definitely
put this together like 3 different versions of the film.
Yeah, it's like, hey, like, this is still probably not the original way the film was shown. There's still probably some differences, but we did the best we could. Okay, well, fucking.
We did the best we could with what we had, and I mean, for a movie that's from 22, it's impressive.
Did you ever think about that though? You ever think about like how it's so annoying we'll never see the true versions of some films?
Yeah, I mean, like the whole problem with that, like back in the day, like we didn't give a fuck about preserving movies. Like,
well, for them especially, like they made a promise with Bram Stoker's Widow saying they would destroy every copy of the movie afterwards because of the lawsuit.
Whoops.
So that was kind of it. It was more so the fact where it's like we're not trying to get into a more heavy induced court battle.
Yeah, of
Just
course.
Destroy the copies. It is what it is. We have our fucking money. It's game.
Yeah, of course. I'm just like saying, even putting that aside, like we as a society didn't really value saving or protecting film for a decent amount of times to the point where we lost movies.
Or
There's a lot of lost
we didn't
movies.
have multiple
We talked about
copies
it
of them
before.
either. Because there was the big fire in Universal that took out thousands and thousands of
Took out a bunch of
films.
Yep, we had that too. But I can't remember when they started like actually like actively preserving movies. But we lost a good chunk of movies that we'll never see again because we just did not care about preserving them.
What was the film? I think there was one that was released recently-ish, or maybe within the past 20 years, where they thought was lost, but it's like, hey, a private collector actually ended up having this film, and we could actually show it to people now, and it's like, oh, fucking thank
The
God.
Orson Welles movie that was on Netflix that they finished.
I don't remember, but I remember that happened. It's like, and it's a
They
film I
just did-
watched. When I found that out, I was like, I'm so glad they fucking figured this out, because like, if I couldn't have seen this, it would have sucked.
That one I don't know, but I know that they just released a movie by George Romero that never got finished on Shudder.
That's
It's
pretty
like
cool.
a new Romero movie that no one ever saw. So that's
I would
what
love if one day they've just found some copy of London After Midnight.
Me too.
That would just fucking be amazing. Because there's that, and some of the horror ones, like the Golem movies, they don't have all of them released. They only have, like, I think, there's like maybe 3 in the series, I think, something like that. And only one of them has been found.
The original version of Freaks
Yeah.
will never be. I think, from what I understand, I think they destroyed everything. So the version of Freaks that you can watch is not the version that was released in theaters. I don't think.
That sucks.
Yeah.
I can't fucking find it anywhere anyways.
Apparently, it's got like an extremely even more dark ending that they had to cut out of it.
It sucks to know. It absolutely sucks to know that some films you'll never actually get to fully watch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so depressing. But I'm glad that we can, in some ways, watch Nosferatu.
Yeah.
I'll say, depending on, like I said, with the Kino release, with some of the public domain releases, like, you're always going to see it differently. There's a lot of different ways to watch it. I was looking up some facts about it, and I found out in the 90s they changed the score to, like, a soundtrack by 00 Negative, and I'm like, wow, I'll never fucking listen to that.
Oh yeah.
But,
Yeah, I know. Like they do that a lot with silent movies, where they'll have someone rescore it.
some of them have multiple scores too.
Yeah.
Like, I think Phantom was released in 2 different years, and in the second year I believe they changed the score and added the color scene, because the original one didn't have the color scene. I think had a different score, and that's why there's different versions of Phantom that's why, like, we have on the Kino release of Phantom, I think there is multiple different versions, but
there's the one with the English intercuts, and then there's one with the original German ones.
yeah, but I think you can choose to watch the scenes with color or without too on the Blu-ray. Oh, wait, are you talking about Nosferatu?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about Phantom.
Oh, I have no idea about Phantom. I
Yeah,
don't
Phantom
have that
has
one.
different cuts to it because they've made it differently, and they've crafted this fucking Frankenstein film differently. Like, it's so...
Yeah.
It was tough to pick all the pieces of that movie because I think it was released, like I said, separate times.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said though, Nosferatu does have one with the German cuts and then one with English. I think that's really fucking cool.
Either way, they're sourced from the original typewriting of what the cards were going to be, so they're supposed to be completely accurate.
Yeah.
Either way, just
I
translated.
mean, the fact it's like a fucking lime green isn't accurate.
Yeah, it was really weird. It's a weird thing to cut to, but that's not the movie's fault.
Yeah, it's just very jarring they chose that.
Yeah, I do like how they showcase like the cards in between, you know, like the dialogue cards. Their art, like they, especially for like the ones where they're cutting to someone reading a book, like they actually designed them really beautifully to kind of like feel more like you're reading a book rather than a cut in a movie.
They do that a lot in the film Haxan as well.
Oh yeah, I want to watch Haxan.
It's tough
I've been wanting to
get
watch
through.
it. Yeah, I've been wanting to watch that one for a while. I heard that at least in the like some of the original versions of it, it was pretty fucked up.
I have to ask, did you ever feel like the film was going too slow?
I think it was going the pace that it could go. Honestly, I don't think that. Yeah, it's a slow movie, but it's just a slow burn. It does feel different though. Like a slow burn silent film feels different than a slow burn talkie. So yeah, it does feel quite slow, but it's something you have to acclimate to over time because it's such a different way than the way that we watch movies. So you have to put yourself in a different mindset while watching them. For some people, that's gonna be tough because I spent my entire life watching movies where I was told a story and shown a story, whereas this one, you're pretty much being shown one. So yeah, I would say that there was a couple times where I felt the slowness of it, but I don't think there was really another way to do it. So
I think some scenes linger too much. I think especially in Act 2, I feel like it can get kind of boring. I love the movie. Like I'll be 100% say this is a great movie. Everyone has to see it, but I think some stuff in Act 2 does drag, and after he meets Count Orlok and some of the stuff with Hutter just become like whatever. Or some of the scenes with Ellen when they talk about other people in the household, it feels pretty pointless. And I'm almost like waiting for things to pick up again. Sometimes right before the middle, and then right before the conclusion. Some things just feel like they just take too much time.
I'll say I definitely felt at times like the cards themselves at times lingered a little bit longer than they should have.
Oh, but they linger so long. There's sometimes, and I don't do this, but like I'll look at my phone being like, what the fuck is it's taking a long time for this card, man. Like I know I can read decently fast, but like who the fuck reads this slow?
Yeah, like I read really fast with stuff like this, and so those were more of the moments where I noticed I'm like, oh, okay, this is a little slow because it just kept on. They put a card up and it'd be there for like, it felt like a full 30 seconds to 45 seconds.
If there's a card up there, you can read it 4 times over at least.
Yeah,
I tested it one time because I'm like, I can read decently fast, but I'll take my time. How many times can I read this? And I got to about like 5 times before it changed.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if I could say I get it because it's an older movie, but I don't know. I just feel like most people can read faster than that. So when it lingers that long, I feel like it's too much. I don't know if it's like
pacing.
Yeah, like I don't know if it's trying to compensate for people possibly not paying attention and then having to snap to it and then be able to read it in time.
I feel like it takes my attention away though, because like I'll be pretty kicked into this film, especially after you meet Orlok. It's like it's hard to look away, and then Orlok leaves and you're focused on Hutter doing random shit. A lot of these cards show up a lot more because in Act 2 there's a lot more dialogue with these cards, so it feels like holy shit, this is dragging so long. Like, why is there so much dialogue to get across right now? I was curious if you did feel like it was tough to get through. Like, do you think that if you didn't have to watch it for the episode, you would have probably paused it and said, I'll do this later?
No, because I've tried to. I've watched this. I've been watched like the first like 15 minutes before, and like at this point, it's just like I've been wanting to just knock this off my list for a while. So I probably wouldn't have bought the Blu-ray, I'll tell you that much. I wouldn't have bought the Blu-ray if we didn't have to do it for this. But yeah, I would have definitely finished it, especially because you've been trying to get me to watch it for a long time. I probably, if anything, I might have paused it and went and gone and made some food and then come back. But I definitely wouldn't have stopped it and started another day.
I love this movie, but I think the more you get into these films, the bigger the learning curve seems for a film like Nosferatu. I feel like, I know Phantom of the Opera might be longer, but I feel like it's easier to get through.
If it is, it's barely longer.
It's easier to get through, and I feel like you watch that, you don't really feel like you're having as much time taken away from you. Caligari's pretty fast too.
Yeah, Caligari's still the reigning champ for me, but Phantom's fucking wonderful. But yeah, Nosferatu, this is a movie that I really enjoy, and I respect the hell out of it from what it has done for the industry, for what it's done for the genre, the quality of craftsmanship, especially for the time period. The performances are great. The makeup's fantastic. Just really, honestly, really impressive. Just Nosferatu himself just looks incredible for the time. And there's some legitimately haunting imagery. Some legitimately spooky shit in this movie that I really appreciated out of a movie from this era. I wouldn't say like it terrified me or anything, but it definitely got me to shiver a little bit, seeing him down at the end of the hallway just staring coldly at Hutter.
Right
and
when he
just,
first opens the door too.
Yeah, it's just like that just keeps me out. It's just because it's the way his stiff mannerisms as he's coming through the door, like he's just so otherworldly. Like he's obviously not human. And it's really a really great performance for a character that's not in the movie that much.
What would you say, not as your favorite scene, but like your favorite shot in the movie?
I mean, I love the shot everyone loves, the whole, claw.
Yeah.
Come up the stairs, obviously.
I'll say take that shot away and take away the shot with him at the doors with Hutter. Take those away. What would be your favorite shot?
Including the one at the end of the hallway?
Take those away.
Fuck me sideways.
Because there's some shots that after this watching, I was more impressed by and thought were genuinely really fucking cool. Two come to mind especially.
I like the shot where he rolls up on the carriage. Nosferatu.
Yeah, that's a cool shot. I like that a lot.
I like that one.
The first one I'll talk about is him on the ship. I think it looks so visually distinct, and he looks so
when he's
out of his element, but it's so fucking cool.
The shot when the camera's looking up at him from the hold.
That's cool, but I like it when it's on like the side of the ship, and you see like the background and everything, and he's just looking up around. Yeah. Because he feels so like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna fucking kill people.
That shot's wonderful.
It's so good.
The shot also where because the captain's like laid up against the wall behind him, behind the steering wheel.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just me, but it kind of freaked me out a little bit because he was laying up against the wall, and it looked like behind him on the wall there was a blood stain.
Oh yeah.
And for the ear, I was just like, wow, that's pretty fucked.
Another shot that I thought was fantastic is when Ellen and Hutter are looking out of their house, and across you see Count Orlok looking in from that building. That is so amazing of a shot.
So creepy.
Like, you look at that and it's like, to see him fixated on them, like he doesn't blink, it's like, holy fuck, that's terrifying.
I also I really appreciate the shot because you can see like it's around the same time, but you can see like the camera is lower in the room, but you can see out the window and you can still see the building.
Yeah.
Just like, like the building is there. Like this is it might be an actual real place.
Yeah.
It's not just a set. Especially for the year, because it's pretty detailed. Like you can see the building. You can really see it.
The thing I love the most about it is they don't have an up close shot of him too, because just his figure is so imposing enough in this random empty building. He's
very clear in the window. Like you can very easily see it's him, and he's just like, I'm coming for you, bitch. Yeah. I fucking one of the funnier moments in it, I actually genuinely laughed, was when his fucking picture falls out onto the table and Nosferatu picks it up and he just looks at it, he's like, your wife has a beautiful neck.
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's a nice thing.
Don't they say that verbatim in the Bram Stoker's Dracula?
I don't think so. I think this is he talks about how beautiful his wife is and that he's a lucky man. But and this is like, yeah, she's got a beautiful neck. I'm just like, and then Hutter's just like,
he's fucking off
it's all
the
about
charts in that scene.
The expression, man, it's all wonderful, man. The performances are so good.
He's like, hey, take a seat, you handsome man. I don't have a lot of guests over. And I'm just like, it's like, dude, fucking calm down. Nobody here knows you're here. Like.
And when he gets up the next morning with the fucking rabbit bite on his neck, he fucking looks over at the table and is like, food, and he just rushes over because his fucking just shovels
drinking.
He's fucking morning drinking. He's like fucking shoveling food in his mouth like a fucking madman.
And he sees the person not too far from Dracula's castle. He's like, hey, deliver my message. Get the fuck out of here, man. Like, what the fuck are you doing here? He's like, he delivers. Like, yeah, just go away.
Like, hey! Runs down the fucking hill.
That's another thing I thought was really well done is how they make the townspeople look so terrified when he says, "I'm going to counter lock." You're like, "Get the fuck out." Fucking go.
Yeah, reminded me of it. Probably has something to do with it, but the scene in American Werewolf in London where he's like, yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
talking about the Moors, and they're just like,
hey, what's that sign up there for?
the pentagram's like, the fuck you talking about, bitch? Why are you talking about my pentagram, bitch? Get the fuck out of my place. Yeah, it reminded me of that. I mean, obviously, this came first, but it's still really
No
funny.
shit, really?
Yeah. Oh my god.
I can't believe Nosferatu ripped off American Werewolf in London.
I guarantee you, there's someone stupid enough on Twitter that would say something like that. Unironically.
We should not allow people to have Twitter if they're 16 or younger.
There's people who are over 16 I think shouldn't have fucking
No,
Twitter
but
too.
like that should just be a fucking ground rule. I'm so sick of doing people that are 16 or younger on Twitter.
You shouldn't be allowed to have Twitter unless you've completed at least 12 years of schooling.
I know some people that still want to be not allowed on Twitter and they're like fucking 30 years old.
Yeah, I know people who are older than 30 who I probably wouldn't give a Twitter to either. But yeah, no.
Yeah, you're fucking stupid, man. You go on film Twitter Discord.
Sometimes it's really funny to watch, and sometimes it's really cringy.
It's mostly just bad.
Yeah, no, it is mostly bad.
I saw one where it's like, hey MCU Twitter.
How Twitter's pretty garbage too.
Hey MCU Twitter, where table you sitting at? And it had like 2 movies per table, and like every good film had a terrible movie next to it. And I said, wow, looks like I'm skipping lunch. Like it was just like it had shit like, oh, Winter Soldier, Thor Ragnarok. Well, I haven't seen that, so I'm not sitting at that table, and I doubt I'd want to. It's like, oh, First Avenger, Age of Ultron. Well, you're not gonna fucking catch me there. It's like all these good movies with like this dog shit, and it's like, who the fuck put this terrible thing together?
I think that's the point. I feel like that's some kind of litmus test. It's like, what brand of shit will you shovel into your mouth?
Not those fucking movies.
Nah, but Nosferatu, man, shit's fire.
Much better than MCU.
Don't let them know that, man. Oh man, not related to Nosferatu, but I was laughing my ass off watching Eraserhead the other day for the first time.
Yeah.
Just thinking about all the people referring to WandaVision as Lynchian
They're just
after
stupid.
watching Eraserhead. I'm just like, what?
I hate comparing.
I just have to
like,
assume that they've never seen something by David Lynch, and they just
Well,
think that, if
this
it's
is-
somewhat slightly peculiar.
I don't want to get too
like-
offhand with like Nosferatu, but this lines in with like just those films in general. People will have an element in one of these movies and say like, it's like this, it's this style, it's this genre. It's like, it's not that fucking genre, dude. As
like-
a comic
like
book reader, you can tell characters that are superheroes with horror stories. You can tell them with sci-fi stories, with straight up just action stories, with comedy. Like, you can have genres in these books, but the way these stories are told in the films, they're first and foremost always action films, and everything comes second, and that's the problem. They aren't multi-genre films. They're straightforward with little speckles of subgenres that don't impact the actual film. And they deal with horror too. Like, I mean, a lot of times it's like, oh, there's a lot of horror atmosphere in this film. That's pretty sick. It's like, it's not fucking sick, dude. Shut up.
I always find that funny because of the whole they hired Scott Derrickson to do Doctor Strange. Everyone's like, oh my god, they're gonna do Doctor Strange like a horror movie, and then it comes out and it's nothing like a horror movie at all.
Yeah, the only thing that's fucking strange is that somebody sits through that movie for fucking about 2 hours. That's my biggest problem. Horror films make me feel like I can love watching a film that isn't 2 hours. Why is every film I'm watching 2 hours and 20 fucking minutes? Like, if a story... And that's the thing, a lot of horror films are just one location, usually. A lot of films we've been talking about are usually done in one location. Or there's not a whole lot of locations to them. So they're more secluded.
Small scale.
But there's still some great storytelling to do.
Yeah.
And if I'm getting that with these films and I'm feeling like, small scale, one location, but I'm interested, how come I'm getting films that are like fucking huge scale, all these locations, and I want to shoot my fucking brains out? Stop having your stories have to be so complex, because you can't handle it, so why the fuck should the viewer have to handle it?
I used to have like a rule of thumb, and I think a lot of people kind of share this perspective on horror movies, but like there's a sweet spot for a runtime of a horror film for a lot of people, I would say, and usually they're looking for it to be between 85 and 95 minutes. I've kind of walked back on that because a lot of movies I've watched lately, especially like in the horror genre that I've really enjoyed, are over that.
lately nowadays, I think you're pushing into 140 to 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, like, a lot of horror films nowadays have broached the 2 hour mark. I mean, like the Conjuring movies, I think all of them are 2 hours long at least.
Yes.
Not the spin-offs. I think those are usually about 90 minutes. But those, and as far as I know, like the first two of those movies are fucking awesome. But the whole point about having like a runtime of that length is justifying having that length of a runtime. And if the story justifies it, then I don't care. The Shining is 2.5 hours, but it's wonderful, so it doesn't matter.
His films are genuinely different with the way Kubrick tells stories a lot of the time.
He's a very meticulous storyteller.
But my problem a lot of the times comes down to the fact that you do have stories that shouldn't be complicated and they are overcomplicated.
Oh yeah.
If you have films by James Wan where he's telling a very contained story, but he's delving out in the emotions, and because those emotions are getting broadened, you're getting an extra 20 minutes of runtime, all right, I'll buy it. But if I'm getting another 20-30 minutes of action in a fucking horror movie, or just in like a regular movie, it's like, why are you giving this to me? Like, am I really grasping a whole lot?
Yeah.
If I'm getting a slasher film nowadays, I really don't want my slasher films to get close to 2 hours. 140, hour 40, hour 50 minutes, I'm okay with. Oh, it's only 10 minutes. 10 minutes makes a big fucking difference in a slasher film.
Yeah. 5 minutes makes a lot of difference.
Oh, for sure.
But I feel like of all the subgenres of horror, the one that I feel like it has to stay in a sweet spot really is slashers. Just because I feel like
slashers and found footage, if you ask me.
Found footage movies just shouldn't fucking exist.
Yes, but being realistic.
Realistic,
like, if you have a found footage movie and you're over like an hour 40 minutes, you're either fucking stupid or you're really just milking that goddamn cow.
Well, like my favorite found footage movie in the past, like 15 years, or however long that genre has been going for. Well,
Blair Witch is 1999.
Years. Well, yeah, but I'm talking about like when it was like it blew up. It blew up after.
I think Blair Witch, it almost blew up nearly immediately after. Resurrection is 2002.
What's up?
Resurrection's 2002.
Yeah, but I'm talking about movies that are beginning to end found footage films, and I feel like that didn't really, like, Blair Witch was really important, but it didn't pop off the subgenre the way that Paranormal Activity did. It became a financially like a huge scale because the movies are so cheap that like studios will just be like, I'll pump out like 7 of those a year and make my money back easy. So like we had a shit ton of those movies after Paranormal Activity hit. So that's like 2009, 2010. At that point, so the past like 10, 11 years, the best one that I've seen is Creep. And that's 70 minutes. So I hear the one that came out last year, the Zoom horror movie that's on Shudder, Host. Yeah, somebody filmed a whole 65-minute horror film last year, only over Zoom. And apparently it's fucking amazing.
I only saw the one that was like that for like Skype. It was like Unfriended.
Yeah, no, it's not like that.
I actually liked that. I thought it was decent. I mean, because the thing is like, oh, it's just a stupid gimmick and they have to make it last the whole film. It's not, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, Mike, this film is fucking amazing. I'm going to sit here and say, yeah, it's a dumb premise, but like, I don't think it's like bad. I think it has a decent runtime and you can get through it easily enough, and that's fine. Like I think it's worth a watch.
I'm just, that's definitely one of my least favorite subgenres. But yeah, I agree with you though that they shouldn't. Those kinds of movies definitely shouldn't approach 95 minutes. But like one of the ones that I really like recently has been like Hereditary. Hereditary is like 2 hours and like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's one part horror film, one part family drama, and it spends that extra time building up characters that we care about, and it really works because of it. So some movies justify having a long...
Midsummer's, I think, 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, I haven't seen.
I'll say this much though, I don't think it builds up a lot about its characters though.
Oh boy. Yeah, I still haven't seen that, and I don't know when I'm going to.
I know we'll get to it eventually, because I haven't seen Hereditary. We'll probably end up doing a back-to-back with those two. Yeah,
I think I'm gonna wind up buying that fucking A24 exclusive 4K set.
Okay. But I think, because we're talking about runtime and lengths of these films, you compare it to a film like Nosferatu, where it is silent. I think this movie is like an hour 40.
Hour 95, 95-minute movie, I think.
Yeah. So it's close to an hour 40, and a lot of the silent films do get around to like an hour 20 to an hour 40. Like, you really have to affectionately say to yourself how much you're going to utilize this runtime. And like we've said, like, I think sometimes Nosferatu does drag in some parts. I think they could change the pacing a little bit. Title cards, obviously, but like even some scenes do, I feel, linger a little bit too much. And then they could change up, especially in Act 2 and like Act 4. This is 1922. there's not a whole lot of feature-length films before Nosferatu, and if it stands up this well and has a testament for silent film afterwards, like, I think that's pretty astounding. You get to see how much these filmmakers and actors utilize with this runtime and with this type of expressing, and since then, you know, it's transcended genre. Now, Nosferatu is not just mimicked in the horror atmosphere or like the horror realm, also other films, just in general, classic cinema takes a lot of notes from this film. That's why I'm glad that we were able to knock this one off for you, because, you know, I love the movie, but I'm glad you could see just how much of an impact it has firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, it's no matter how much I can quibble with it, it's one of the most undeniably important movies ever made. You know, it's one of those movies that launched a genre. You know, horror is pretty much cinema's oldest genre. You know, one of the very first movies ever made, I believe we talked about this in one of the early episodes, is Edison's Frankenstein.
1910, I believe.
Yeah, so it's like, this is just an evolution of cinema's oldest genre, and it's something that has remained in pop culture for over 100 years now, or for almost 100 years now.
Yeah, especially Nosferatu. Everyone talks about the fucking SpongeBob joke.
It's something that I don't think is going anywhere anytime soon, and maybe I think this is a movie I feel like more people should watch. You know, it's obviously an incredibly popular movie that I'm sure that many people have seen
or have at least heard of.
Yeah, and I think if you're someone who is interested in movies, period, I think that at some point in your life you should watch this movie. It's one of the most important movies ever made. It's got great performances. It's got some of the most iconic imagery ever put to film. It's a really interesting kind of situation because of the way that the film came about. It's supposed to be a Dracula movie. It's not a Dracula movie because Bram Stoker's widow's like, no, you can't make this fucking movie as a Dracula movie. So they went and made their own movie, and they made their own changes to the lore. They created things that we now accept as fact into the vampire mythos. It's a movie that is very important to a lot of the things that we all enjoy on a daily basis. So I think it's something that everyone should watch.
I think the myth and legend behind Nosferatu makes it so much more interesting to me. The fact, like I said, it's come out of Dracula's shadow and has cast its own shadow. The fact that some people like Stephen King visualize Nosferatu as being the only way to depict a vampire, I think is very interesting because it's so drastically different than how it usually is depicted. I think let's end it with that and get into final thoughts.
My final thoughts are just that this is one of the most important movies ever made. It's a movie that everyone needs to watch at least once in their lives. And I think that it's a fascinating story, not just as a film, but the history about it and what it has brought to cinema over the years and decades. It's just a wonderful, enjoyable movie. It has its issues. It's an early film. It's definitely a bit long in the tooth at times, especially with the length that it holds on certain sequences. But it's worth watching for Max Schreck. It's worth watching for the ambiance and the tone. It's just a wonderful time capsule of a movie.
Just score
4.5 out of 5, maybe a 4. Kind of right in the line.
I find the interpretations of Nosferatu more interesting than Dracula. I prefer a more classic depiction of Dracula if I'm going to see a visual demeanor of the character, but I always love the way that they do the storytelling in Nosferatu. It always feels more mesmerizing, it always feels more mystical, because they're letting themselves into a more creative realm, and I think that's really cool. Even the remake in 1979 does a lot of drastically different things with the Dracula mythos, but it's still very distinct and sticks it to like the Nosferatu lore, which is very cool. And that's why I've always considered these films to be so separate from Dracula and in its own way, just kind of casting its own shadow, having its own way to tell its story and push along. I don't know if I'd say Nosferatu is my favorite story for Dracula, but there's a lot of things I do genuinely think is the best. I like Hutter a lot in this version. I like the way that things are depicted in this version as far as like atmosphere and setting. I like the way the story flows between different characters. I think there's a lot to love in Nosferatu, and I think if you like the story of Dracula, you should at least watch this version of Nosferatu and say, cool. To know how they had limitations and go around it, and that those limitations changed the world and the way we view vampires, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I'll always be happy with the fact that I got to fall in love with the film on my own instead of being told, hey, check this out, you have to watch Nosferatu.
Yeah, I especially really appreciate that you can really trace a lot of cool things, like you said, back to this movie, but a lot of people don't talk about it as much as, when people think of Dracula or a vampire, the first thing they think of is going to be Bela Lugosi. They think of that iconic version of Dracula, and it's kind of amazing how a lot of the stuff that we take for granted within the vampire subgenre is actually more so from Nosferatu than from Dracula.
I agree.
Despite the fact that I'm sure, like, even Todd Brownie's Dracula kind of...
Oh, yeah, it gets a lot of
stuff
depictions and imagery from this film.
So it's kind of funny that the preeminent visual of a vampire actually takes a lot from the unofficial version of itself. Yeah. It's kind of interesting how that works out. Like I said, fascinating history about this movie.
History is the best way to describe the movie. Like, I'm not one to delve out on facts about films, but I feel like with a film like this, where it is so ingrained in history and the way that it tells its story and the way that it goes around things, it's very interesting. If I had to give a score, I'd probably say it's about 9.5 out of 10. I feel like that's the best way to chalk it up, because I have, like I said, there is pacing issues with me, and like I feel like sometimes that I love the film and even I can find some things a little boring.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching this. This is an experience I was happy to have. It's one silent movie off my list. I think the next one for me is going to wind up being like Metropolis, and Metropolis is going to be a tough watch.
One of my favorites is Hunchback with Lon Chaney.
I want to watch Hunchback too. I want to watch that one too. Sure. But like Metropolis, we were talking about run times. Metropolis is like 2.5 hours. So yeah, it's gonna be a tough one.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for enjoying our discussion for Nosferatu, a bunch of the creepy imagery, a bunch of the kooky characters, and a bunch of the fun we had discussing it. And if you like this, jump into our next episode where we'll be talking about one of our favorite films. This one could be Mike's, and we'll see how much fun we can have with that one. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.